You know, we're all here on planet Earth sharing this experience together. And there's a part of us that knows that this is just one small part of who we are. And there was just something in you this morning that called you to come here. There was a part of you that knew you wanted to be where we talk about God, where we talk about oneness, where we talk about love. Because you could have decided to go Christmas shopping, or you could have slept in, or you could have, I don't know if there's a ball game today, but you could have stayed home for a football game. But that part of you that is you, it knows that this human experience is just one aspect of who we are, and it's always nudging us to keep moving forward on our search until one day we realize that it's been here all along. As our founder, Ernest Holmes, says so clearly, what you're looking for, you're looking with. And today I want to share with you how important connection is on that journey. And I want you to know I came into the building and Mo helped me move all the chairs because I just felt that this was a better way to connect than to have, this way you can kind of see each other. You know who's here this morning. And doing that and being up there just did not feel right. It was like, I wanted to be down here just with the family. So do you like it? Okay. Do you think we should keep it like this? Okay. I don't know. This is the first time, and I sprung this on the AV team, that everything was down here and the wire for the mic was too short. So thank you guys for making whatever work here this morning. Anyway, I'm glad you like it. So when we come into this earthly experience, we have no independent, separate concept of who we are. We're completely tied to our mothers. And we spend a great portion of our life trying to develop a sense of a separate identity, trying to figure out who we are, how we want to show up in the world, what we stand for. And then as we get a little bit older, we start to realize that sometimes that can throw us into competition, into comparison, into feelings of separation or disconnection or even isolation. And we see this not just personally, but socially and politically. Oh, I did say politically. I guess it is politically as well. So, most of us were carrying around this very quiet sense of feeling a little bit alone, a little bit separate. And then the pandemic hit. And it took that feeling that we had within us, and it projected it out into almost every aspect of our life, from our shopping to our schools to our family to our work. It was just everywhere in our face. And when Kathy Zavada offered the benediction last month when she did her concert, she had us circle the room, hold hands, and sing the peace song. And as I looked around the room, I could see a lot of us were very deeply touched. And I wondered, well, I didn't wonder why. I noticed it, and then I realized that this connection that we were experiencing, we used to do every Sunday here together. And we hadn't been able to do it for so long. It was in that moment I realized how far we had shifted. And just kind of, step by step, you don't really notice. So instead of sitting with each other, we had learned to put space between us. There was no hugging, no touching, no singing, no breathing on each other. Our faces were covered, our stores were shuttered, and all of our social venues were closed. And then, on top of that, there was the pervasive fear of getting the virus, and then the divisiveness in how we were supposed to protect ourselves and each other. Connection, as we knew it, changed dramatically. And thank God, I think we've been able to see that difference, and we're working our way back. Hence the room. So after developing that separate sense of self that the pandemic so exaggerated for us, we're now realizing that a separate identity may not be the real goal. That urge within us is calling for us to come back together, to reconnect with each other. And just for example, the fellowship we shared making those fleece scarves for the local shelters, I mean, coming together and connecting with each other, it was just felt so good, and I don't think it gets any better than that. You know, it's like a litmus paper. It tells you when you're on the right track. Connection also feels good because it embraces that sense of a shared self. You know, coming together, we create something greater than we do individually. Connection allows us to expand from the me consciousness. Relationships lead us into the we. And this is important. This is really important because the me to the we is the next step into really experiencing our oneness. Me to we to one. And the spiritual principles in the science of mind are just exactly what we need. Reverend Kathy told us last week in her lesson that love leads the way and law makes the way possible. That love within us is calling us to come together and continue this evolutionary process, while the law, the spiritual principles, are here to guide and support us. Were any of you here when I read the story autobiography in 5 chapters? You were? Okay, well, we have an expansion. And yes, Sharon, mine is different. She came up with an expansion, and then all of a sudden this one came to me, so we share them. So for those of you who don't know the story, it is an analogy of how we move through and navigate our human dramas. With the analogy of falling into a hole in the sidewalk. So you fall in and you're angry, and then the next time you fall in, you blame it on someone, and then you finally learn to take responsibility. And in chapter 4, you learn to walk around the hole, and then in chapter 5, you choose to walk down a different street. Well, I'm proposing chapter 6. And chapter 6 is when we walk down a new street together, moving from that me consciousness to the we. Jim Lockhart, in his study on spiral dynamics, tells us that approximately 40% of people right now are going within and working on themselves, while another 30% are ready to move past that, ready to move on to the we connection. And you know, I think most of us here in this group are a part of that. I think we've become pretty comfortable with identifying our stories, and for the most part, we've figured out how to create newer, healthier choices for ourselves. And I know this is true for me, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, now that I've kind of got that situated, understood, what is the next step? And I love what Reverend Elijah Christopher said at Asilomar this year in his talk. He said, for the last 100 years, which is about how long Science of Mind has been here, we have been learning about the principles, we've been studying the principles, we have been using them in our lives, we've been doing our introspection. And now that we've got that pretty well figured out, it's showtime. It's time for us to put that knowledge and those principles to work. And it's time to take it beyond ourselves and move it out into, time to move it out into a larger arena. It's time we learn how to create real open-hearted connection, because that leads to collaboration, which is what it's going to take to bring the world together. In the book, The Good Life, it was just released this year, and it tells about the Harvard study of adult development. Yes, I have been reading all these things, you guys. And it followed the lives of 2 generations of individuals for over 80 years. It was the longest study, scientific study, and supported by other studies on what makes people happy. So I'm going to ask you, but if you know the answer, do not say it. But if you don't know the answer and you just want to venture a guess, what do you think makes people the most happy? Well, yes. I thought you might say, money, fame, right? But no, it is strong relationships. That was what they discovered was the most important part to creating a healthy and happier life. And it was all kinds of relationships, work relationships, marriages, family, partnerships, friendships you made in houses of worship, on the tennis court, in a book club. That it was moving beyond the me and into the we that made for a happy life. And it seems like indications are coming up that are telling us that that is where we're called to go next. Are you all in agreement? Okay. Well, remember, becoming self-aware is a very important first step. And now that we have a pretty good understanding of that, it's time to start walking and writing chapter 3 together. And time to learn how to develop those heart-centered relationships. First, I want to show you ways that don't work, because it'll give you the contrast that will help you know what will work. And to do that, I offer you an analogy. Thanks to Schoolhouse Rock, I learned that conjunctions are the way we connect thoughts. And I noticed while on a walk that the function of a conjunction can also explain the way we connect to each other. So Scarlett, can you play the first minute? Right around 57 seconds it goes into the second verse, but this will just give you you'll remember the tune.
As your body grows bigger,
your mind must flower.
It's great to learn,
'Cause knowledge is power.
Well, maybe that's the point too. Well, that's not the one, but if you don't have it, I can give you a clue. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? Okay, good. Well, then you don't have to listen to me.
for Conjunction Junction.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Hooking up words and phrases and clauses.
Conjunction, junction, how's that function?
I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done.
Conjunction, junction, what's their function?
I got and, but, and or, they'll get you pretty far. And, that's an additive, like this and that. But, that's sort of the opposite, not this, but that. And then there's or, O-R, when you have a choice like this or that. And, but, and or, get you pretty far.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
Hooking up 2 boxcars,
good.
making them run right.
And there. And why that came to me, I don't know while I was walking, but that's what came to me. And in grammar, a conjunction brings together two or more events at the same time and place. So what they're doing is they're creating a relationship. So I want to take a minute and look at those three train cars at Junction. Because I want you to see the type of relationships they actually create. And as I explore these, I want you to be kind of thinking of the metaphor in your mind of relationships you may have or may have had, just to kind of get some clarity on what's going on. So we're going to start with or. This or that. Male or female. Yes, it gives you a choice, but it also causes separation. It requires choosing. And when you choose one thing, you automatically discard the other. So it's creating duality. You can't have both. There's no gray, there's no middle. It's either this one or that one. Or is a very important part of creating separation. And what does an or relationship look like? Perhaps it would show up as my way or the highway. It's definitely not an inclusive relationship. It's more like mixing oil and water. They never quite come together. They never merge. It does not create inclusion. It looks like two people having two separate lives. Have you ever had an experience like that? Now I have to say this right. Let's talk about the relationship with but, not a but relationship. It also separates and does so by showing contrast or exclusion. I love my neighbors, but not the ones that don't think like I do. While or is not inclusive, but is clearly exclusive, or at least conditional. It only accepts with conditions attached. It shows up frequently in our self-judgments, like, I like everything about me but my big nose. So when you say but, it cancels out the first part of the sentence. I like everything about me. Okay? It's difficult to have connection when you have things that differentiate and then reject. And how does but show up in relationships? These relationships are very selective. Things have to show up in a certain way, a way that's acceptable and pleasing. It excludes parts and pieces of people, ideas, and behaviors that don't fit in. And maybe we're not the ones doing the excluding. Maybe someone else is finding exception with us, not accepting us as we are. So, but creates a very conditional relationship. And then there's the one conjunction whose whole function is to connect. My favorite, and. And is the answer to connection. It doesn't create a relationship by making you have to make a choice or making you have to exclude something. It creates a relationship by bringing things together, like bread and butter, toast and jam. And it can create something new out of that merging, like yellow coming from blue and green, like two separate selves having a shared experience. This is really how connection is created. And not only does it create it, it causes expansion. It's this and that. So now there's even more. It's inclusive, expansive, and creative. True connection requires an and consciousness. Moving from me to we requires that you move from this or that, or this but not that, to this and that. We can sit together and we can still keep some space between us. I can love myself and still think that my nose might be a bit large. It keeps everything inclusive. Nothing is excluded or conditional. Connection is an and function, and is the next step on the way to our realizing our oneness. That's why it's important. It's you and me, love and law, human and divine. And how does and show up in relationships? It allows for differences to stand equally. It bypasses that which would separate and instead brings even divergent things together, yin and yang, air and water, light and darkness. It is the ultimate unifier. And now, Scarlett, you can show the picture. Today is Roger's birthday. You could not have joined two more different people together than Roger and me. He was smart, good-looking, hardworking, and he loved his Dr. Pepper and his Harley. He rode his motorcycle to Sturgis every year and could not wait to get out of California when he could take off his helmet. So, and every year he would invite me to go with him. My worst nightmare. There was not one thing about Sturgis that in any way called to me. Not the greasy food, not ZZ Top, not riding on the back of that motorcycle for over 1,000 miles. How about camping on asphalt with like 5,000 or 10,000 people? I mean, there was literally nothing redeeming about going to Sturgis. But it was perfect because while he was gone, I would stay at home and light all my candles and my incense and put on my pretty music and have a week of every day being a spa day. And it worked because he was able to let me be who I was, and I was able to let him be who he was. If you have relationships that create limitation, exclusion, are conditional, or require that you have to make a choice, you're most likely creating more separation than connection. And it's a good time for all of us to begin learning ways to get along, to not only accept and value difference, but to thrive in diversity. This and that. I have a useful worksheet that Scott Wyman handed out to us. We meet weekly for a community of awakening, and it is entitled, How Well Do I Connect? And I made some copies, so if any of you feel like you would like to do a little more inner work on it, it asks you questions so you can explore how you connect with yourself, with others, and with Source. So just ask me after the service. In addition, I would like to offer 4 suggestions that will help expand and deepen your connections. But first, I want a glass of water. Thank you, SSC. The first thing is to go deeper. Go beyond the outer conditions and the stories you're telling yourself. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Carolyn did the guided meditation, and she shared how troubled she was with the violence and the suffering in the world. And it didn't take her too long, but she found her spiritual rudder in the words of Paramahansa Yogananda on his lesson on unity. And in that, he reminds us to remember the truth of who we are, beyond the cultural differences, the different colors, the complex histories, to go beyond the surface conditions. We need to go back far enough and far enough where we remember that we're all brothers and sisters created by one source. Don't be distracted by outer appearances. Go beyond the condition. And I understand that sometimes that is not only extremely difficult, but it may seem impossible. And that's okay. That's part of the wholeness as well. We're not excluding. Another way to help create real relationships is to realize that connection doesn't happen in the mind. You can't think or analyze your way into a meaningful relationship. You can try, but you need to feel it. It's a heart thing, not a head thing. And if you have difficulty identifying your feelings or allowing yourself to feel, relationships can be difficult because it's the heart that connects. And your heart lets you know if something's off. Regardless of the relationship, if you're not experiencing peace, it's the feeling is there to let you know that something needs to be healed. Heart math shows us that we're all connected through a field of electromagnetic energy. The heart literally links us to one another. And what we add to that energy field is felt throughout the network. The more we learn to have a heartfelt connection, the more it'll be felt not just in our relationships, but it will be felt around the world. Centers for Spiritual Living has a vision statement that says, we want a world that works for everyone. And this is where it begins. What we do individually and collectively is important. It's felt everywhere. It makes a difference. It's evolutionary. It is what moves us forward. A third suggestion is to stay in the present moment. Don't dredge up evidence from the past or speculate about the future. What's real is what's happening now. And take a breath and breathe into that new moment. You don't try to connect while you're being tossed about on turbulent ocean waves. You go deeper where there's no turbulence, into the calm abiding. When you can be present with calmness, with an open and inclusive heart, there will be true connection. And finally, my fourth suggestion is inspired by this pin Jasper gave me. It says, love thy neighbor, no exceptions. Interesting how easy it is for us to love those who are lovable. And yet we're called to go deeper because those that are the most unlovable need the most love. We're called to go deeper because we can see the truth of who they are, a child of God. Yes, even those that your ego mind is telling you right now is totally unacceptable. The light is at the center of each one of us, no exceptions. And so, Scarlett, if you can lower the lights for a minute, I want to show you an analogy. This was told to us by Scott Wyman as well. I have to give him credit. So if you could lower the house lights a tad. So this is a fiber optic light. Now you see, there's only one light. There's only one light in there. And at the bottom, you can see how closely we all are tied and united together. And though we might appear to be divergent, we might appear to be separated, you can tell it's only an illusion. The move from me to we and ultimately to one is foremost a call to love without exception. No ors, no buts, no exclusions, no conditions. And that means to know the truth of who you really are so you can see it in others. You cannot have oneness and leave a few people out. It's everyone. It's oneness. And learning how to have a present, heartfelt connection is our next step. It starts with me, it expands to we, and it returns to the one. So let's hold hands and let's walk down that new street together. Namaste. Thank you all. Thank you.